I had another question for you, which I want to ask you another time.
Oh, we're already
It's
recording.
it's
Yeah, go
oh, we are?
on. Yeah, we
Oh,
started recording, didn't we?
okay.
Well, I am. Are you recording?
I am actually.
Yeah,
Forgot
yeah,
you're
yeah,
right. I did.
yeah. This feels like this might be the meatiest episode of our Back to Basics series. What do you think, Steph?
Yeah, we got a lot to talk about. We probably should get to it.
Okay,
We're
enough dilly-dallying, Sarah.
enough
Let's get on with
dilly-dallying.
it.
We have some tools. We have some ways to put some of the things we've been talking about over the past couple of weeks. And if you haven't heard the past couple of weeks, we are in the middle of a Back to Basics series, which is a 4-part series. That's just kind of bringing everything, all the basics back, bringing
Hmm.
up like why do we have eating disorders? What do I have an eating disorder? Do I have disordered eating? Does it matter what the difference is? But today we're talking about what we can do if listening to the past couple of episodes have kind of driven home the fact that, yeah, maybe I do need some help. What do I do about that?
Hmm.
We gotcha.
A lot of recovery programs really emphasize this idea of having toolbox, things that you can reach for that can help you in different aspects along the way of recovery. First of all, it's kind of what we did in the first episode, I would say. We've got education, and we're looking at what is this problem here? I can remember when I was searching on the internet, couldn't understand why I couldn't stop eating and stumbled across binge eating disorder. I finally had a place to begin my journey of figuring out how to get out of this thing.
Yes, right. So there is a world of information out there and people talking about this that, again, I have to sometimes remind myself that not everybody knows that because I've been in it for so long. But I meet people who are like, I can't believe I know, and nobody talks about this ever. Like I never meet anyone talking about this. I don't even know where to go. There is a wealth of information out there in books, in podcasts, on YouTube channels, on social media, Instagram, TikTok. Even, I don't know if I'm going to recommend TikTok. I don't know. Well, there's some good TikTok accounts out there actually. And so, yes, we provide some of that. We have an entire library of podcast episodes that talk about this ad infinitum, including the past two. If you maybe look for search terms in Google or on YouTube or in social media of what are the common, what would you look, what would you search up?
Food freedom, I think, is one of my favorite hashtags. Diet culture can often be quite a good one because it's linked
Yes.
into other things like that. Intuitive eating, even binge eating recovery. You tend to, on Instagram anyway, you get a warning thing flash up, don't you? Going, are you sure you're okay? Do you want to carry on searching? And you can go, yeah. I mean, YouTube as well, I think, is a great source
Mm.
of information for things like this. I have a YouTube channel, The Binge Eating Therapist, that you can check out. Loads of my videos on there from an educational standpoint because I'm not doing therapy on YouTube. You can't. So I am just putting content out there to help people understand different concepts and what might be going on for them. So why are we putting education first, Steph?
Well, as we talked about last week, because a lot of it reduces the shame. It's confusing. This stuff is so confusing. I think education is pivotal. What word? It is important to kind of understand where this is coming from because it deconstructs the stigma and I think it deconstructs the shame and it makes things make sense.
Mm.
So there's education for me anyway. It's one of my value systems. Anyway, it's not necessarily for everybody else, but I understanding things to me has been one of the most helpful things.
Yeah.
I can't really rank them though.
Yeah. And not even just understanding like how you got to where you are, but understanding what is it that's going on for you now. Because sometimes when you hear other people talking about it and you resonate, sometimes it can feel like somebody's in your mind, they're reading your mind. You're like, oh my goodness, like I resonate with that. I've never thought about it like that. It means it was something you kind of already knew experientially, but you didn't have the words for it. And when we are using something like education, we are talking, we're finding language, which enables us to put things into concepts. And when they're in concepts, then we need language really to be able to change things. Does that make sense? Am I
It
going a bit too
no,
convoluted with this?
it's important. And I think it folds into something else I think is really important to say. I think that there's different branches of education on this. And Googling binge eating, I usually get the hits of like government-based websites and associations that talk about this in a very, sometimes in a very generic way, and also sometimes in a very old school way that is not helpful. I don't think to me it wasn't. So when I think about education around these topics, it's people who are talking about binge eating or anorexia or bulimia or disordered eating or orthorexia with the intersection of things like intuitive eating anti-diet to a degree. I know both of us prefer the term non-diet, but anti-diet is a popular umbrella for people who are talking about, who aren't talking about how to recover from an eating disorder and still lose weight. Like this is not, I think, helpful, as well as maybe body neutrality, weight neutrality, health at every size, these kinds of concepts, I think, because you're going to get a lot of hits about disordered eating. And I think where you're getting the information from matters. So there's certain value systems attached to the way that I like to think about recovery, that the recovery has actually happened for me through that matter as far as where I'm getting my education from. Books like Sarah's. First of all, Sarah has a book which you read it for free.
Yeah,
on YouTube.
On my YouTube channel. Yeah,
it is called.
Yeah, I Can't Stop Eating.
By Sarah
Me.
Dosanjh. I also, this podcast. I personally really benefited from the book The Fuck It Diet by Caroline Dooner. Everybody knows that if you've listened to this podcast before.
The Intuitive Eating book.
Yep, by Elyse, Resch, and Evelyn Tribole.
We also have episodes where they've come on the podcast. So you can, if you prefer to listen to your education, that's fine as well. I think sometimes when people talk about, oh, go and read a book, who's got the capacity to concentrate on a book these days? Hasn't technology taken that away from most of us?
I like a good book in my hands.
Yeah. And there's so many ways to consume content based on your preference. But you mentioned the government websites and things like the National Health Service here in the UK. For me, whenever I read that, and I don't know what your feeling is when you've seen similar explanations, is it's this dry list of behaviors.
Yeah.
And I want somebody who's going to speak to me from like how that feels and what that's actually like. For me, like this is just how I'm wired, and this might not be for everyone. Some people might just like the dry facts, and that might help just with their processing. But for me, I want to feel like someone is describing my experience, not just listing my behaviors. So that would be important to me when I'm trying to understand something.
Yeah. And for that reason, I think social media and YouTube give that nuance and give the personal stories that make it feel much more relatable and much more real. I think it's more realistic. Anything else we want to recommend as far as like accounts or books or podcasts?
Well, there's probably loads of Instagram accounts that you and I like. So maybe we could put a little list in the show notes rather than listing them off. People got to remember them and type them in.
Yes, sure. Okay, great. We will put this in the show notes. We will give you some resources.
Yes, because what is on your feed really does matter. You know, let's say you get some coaching or you go to therapy about this, but then you are spending at least an hour a day on Instagram looking at fitness accounts that are not kind of the opposite of what it is that you're trying to do. They're reinforcing something which isn't working for you. So cleaning up your social media feed is huge. Anyone that you follow, even friends or something, whose content makes this process harder for you, just mute them. They don't have to know popping up. Yeah, exactly.
Or have a separate social media account for this. I have a bunch of clients who just have an account where it's like they just know they can go there and feel supported in these areas where they're not going to scroll by anything that's making them feel like the trigger comparison, or feeling like I'm not enough, or feeling like you have to be exercising every day, or feeling like you have to be eating a certain way. That's just like a very safe account to have that no one needs to know you have. You don't have to follow your friends there. It's kind of the point. But I also want to say this kind of philosophy, there are fitness accounts who also combine with this. So it's not like you can't ever look at people who want to talk about movement or exercise. Like there is an intersection of that, and we will include those as well, because almost it's the philosophy is more widespread than just eating disorder recovery.
Agreed. So somebody's educated themselves and they're like, okay, now what?
Well, one of the most important things that I did, I don't know, and probably you did, I mean, is the case of regular eating, right? So in the last episode, we talked about the biology of it and the primal brain and what triggers the primal brain into feeling threatened, which triggers disordered behavior. Regular eating, however you want to conceptualize that, and we can talk about that in an all-in capacity versus not. Some people like to have, I'm an advocate. I really enjoy having anchor meals, which are different, distinct periods of the day where I'm eating pretty regularly. I'm not waiting to get hungry necessarily. This is not for everybody, but the regulation of your eating pattern, so that your body is not experiencing any points where it's getting over hungry, which is triggering that that threat in the primal brain, which then will potentially trigger a binge or the kind of adrenaline that fuels restriction even. So keeping your body in that homeostasis place is, for me, I have to. That's something that I have to do.
And so if you're wondering why regular eating would be a tool, because the temptation is, particularly after an episode of compulsive eating or binge eating, the temptation is to make up for it or to somehow try to compensate this idea. I want to balance it out. I've eaten so much today, so I'm going to skip breakfast, or tomorrow I'm going to try to eat less, or whatever, however you might approach that. And the whole point of regular meals is to support your primal brain and your here and now cognitive brain, to give them that reassurance that food is coming, that it's not scarce, that you're not going to restrict. The other piece as well, which I found quite helpful, is ghrelin, which is one of the hunger hormones, and it's released in the stomach. It has a circadian cycle, and ghrelin will learn your patterns as well. But ghrelin's circadian cycle is it's low in the morning and it rises gradually throughout the day. And then around 7 p.m., you get a bit of a spike, which is often why you feel hungry at night. And chances are that's an evolutionary thing to get you to eat something before you go to bed, because you're going to be in a fasted state while you're asleep. What happens when you're trying to save up your calories throughout the day? You're trying to eat less throughout the day because ghrelin is lower. So the temptation is, because it's easier to eat less throughout the day, is you need to take advantage of that. Because when you struggled with binge eating or something, you know that you can get to a place where you feel compulsive and you feel like you eat too much in one go. So you try and take advantage of the time where you don't feel like you need to do that. The problem is when you don't eat so much during the day, is your ghrelin level rises quicker. And so you still get the spike in the evening. And then you get this bigger spike, and this hunger has built up throughout the day. And especially depending on how sensitive your brain is to restriction, you can get a backlash for that. And these are the people that I hear saying, you know, I've had a filling dinner, I had a big dinner, and I even had some dessert, and I don't understand why I still eat, because I'm not hungry. And this is why having a look at how much you're eating during the day, if before 3 p.m. you're eating less than half of your daily intake, this might be something to consider and try out. You don't need to scare yourself by going, okay, this means that, I have to front load my day and I have to do it like this. Try it for a week. Try having some bigger meals for breakfast and lunch. Try it for a week, because you're only going to continue with it anyway if you think it's helpful and if it's working for you.
I think that taps in a little bit to the psychological aspect of, well, then I won't have my sort of comfort eating at night, because it can feel like when food is so coveted because it's been restricted, or even, including mental restriction, it can feel like the safe place, and then it just feels like you're giving something up or sacrificing at night. We should do an episode on that. Did we? Maybe we did.
I use food as a reward is probably the closest to it.
Yeah. We'll think about that. Yes, again, the tool of regular eating is to help your physio. It's working with the body. It's working, and the psychology for that matter, but it's helping set yourself up so that you're not triggering responses that you have no control over. So big one.
Yes. Let's talk about all-in recovery. So some people choose this path. They go, I am going to go all in. What are we talking about when we're saying all in?
Sort of that. It's kind of black and white. It's kind of it's this idea of, all right, from now on, I will eat all the things that I want all the time, anytime, no rules, bring in all my fear foods, just go all in terms of what recovery experts, quote unquote, tell me to do. I did that, period.
Yes.
P.S.
Yes.
And I did that.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you, why that? Why that option as opposed to trying to do it gradually?
Because I was a black and white thinker. So to me, it was much easier to be like, this is the switch I'm flipping. I need it to be all, because I don't know how to do it a little bit. Like I just preferred to just do it, to jump in the pool. It cut down on my decision making. It was like, no, you're allowed. And that's just what I did. And it's also what I think I needed to do, because at that point I was doing it from a very, very embodied place. Like I knew that felt so right to me from this core knowing. So I didn't even think about, and this is just what I did, just the way I saw it making sense.
And I think because it is such a wholehearted approach, that I wouldn't recommend anybody to do this unless it really does feel right to you.
Yeah.
Like really feels right, not because you just heard other people do it. There can be doubts, there can be fear and all of that, but there's something, I think, for those people who've done this and it's really been helpful, it's a real sense of solidity in this decision, because I think what people do is they almost bounce in and out of it. They go, okay, I'm going to go all in. And then they have a day of where they eat all day. And then they go, oh, no, 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 I can't do this. And then they pull back and they go in and they go out and they go in and they
Yes.
go
And then
out.
they say it doesn't work
Yes.
because it's not real. And I have to say, I don't think I could have done it all in without support, because I had so much fear coming up. It was incredibly scary. So I needed to feel safe, that, because I wanted to be like, let me stop this. Let me stop this, but I had enough support to keep me going.
So then people for whom this wouldn't be, or people not even, I don't want to say that there's anybody that this wouldn't be suitable for, but those who I might think would need to or might benefit from thinking this through carefully, what comes up for me, and I'm really interested in your thoughts here as well, is that I think it depends how much, for me, I'm going to speak about this from my experience, because food was very much a way of escaping. I would use food to escape and to numb. My instinct is if I'd done this, that I would have just been in this constant place of escape and numbing.
Yeah.
And this, and I mentioned this in my YouTube video today, actually, because I've been thinking about it since, because I think it is so important. When I talk about the pause, I used to pause before I, to try and check in with myself before deciding whether to eat something or not. You described that for you at that point, your restrictive eating disorder at that point in your recovery would have come in with all the reasons, all the restrictive thoughts that would have made that situation potentially feel unbearable, whatever the outcome was. Whereas I had never thought about it like that, because that had not been my experience, that a restrictive voice is going to come in and convince me from this restrictive place that this is a really bad idea to even consider having this and I mustn't do it. So I think that's an important piece that I want to just put forward as well to the listeners about which side of that you feel is closer to your experience.
I run a group a couple times a year talking about the option of all in recovery, but it comes with this caveat that if that is the choice, or if that's the method, that eating has to be conscious. Because if it's not, you run the risk of this, you just basically just get enveloped in the trauma of it, I think. Or you can, it's just like, oh, I'm just hiding in this. Consciousness seemed to go hand in hand with this inner knowing to me. I also was a conscious binger. Maybe that is part of the, maybe that matters. But to me, when we talk about all in, it's saying you have permission to eat. You just have permission to eat everything. You don't have to second guess it. You don't have to limit or control it or manipulate it in any way. But permission is defined as true permission, like consciousness, and really staying with yourself through the eating. That's how I think about permission. It's real. It's not like I'm just going to do it and hide. It's eating in front of yourself. So that's part of how I even conceptualize all in recovery. It's not just going through the motions of eating all the things whenever you want. It's choosing it from a place of permission. And that isn't, I don't think that's available to everybody all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're not really bought into the idea, permission's not going to be there. Or if you're overwhelmed by what, again, we talked in the last episode about the trauma response sometimes, because safety and food are linked. So if you're eating in this way that's making you feel unsafe, you're in a freeze. You're not in the part of your nervous system that can really accept that you're doing it and be connected to the food. So I think defining what permission really means is important, and knowing these nuances is really important.
Yes, agreed. So if this is something you want to explore more, I mean, Caroline Dooner's book that we've already mentioned, The Fuck It Diet, I think is a great overview of this and really kind of goes into the whys and what to expect. There's also loads of people who've put their stories out there. You can search for people's accounts. You can watch people talking about their experience on YouTube. So you get a sense when you're listening to someone tell their story, whether your experience really resonates with theirs when they're talking about where they've come from and where they're getting to. So again, this is one, I think, for each person to consider and research, because there's pros and cons to it.
I want to mention that something that often comes up in this is differences in body size. So I hear a lot, right, that all in recovery is for people who are in a smaller body because they can somehow afford to gain that weight. And I understand that perspective. It's like it's a lot easier for somebody in a smaller body to go all in and potentially gain weight very quickly because their body's still going to be socially acceptable or still be straight sized. And I just want to name that that's a valid thing to think about. And I'm not saying that it means that only small bodied people should do all in, but I'm saying that if you're somebody who's not in a small body and you're having hesitations about that approach for that reason, that's fair. Like, because what you're asking yourself to do is inherently more threatening than somebody in a smaller body. Everything's about our own sense of safety and control, but then you've got the additional layer of what society will say, or that you can't buy clothes in the same store, or fitting into chairs or airplane seats and things like that. And those are factors to consider. And I just want to say that because I think that gets missed sometimes in that conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to hop on that piece as well, that if everybody you're listening to is talking about this all-in approach, so often it's spoken about weight gain as you will gain weight if you are in recovery from something like binge eating. Or people will say you will lose weight, like depending on which route you go down, like there's these promises. And I didn't gain weight in recovery because actually saying yes to food was really easy for me. But once I made that yes much freer and much more conscious, then it became possible to be able to go, actually, I'm not going to have that now. I am allowed it all the time. Whilst my behavior was very permissive, so I was able to say yes, it was changing the quality of that yes for me that came out as through the permission part, the permission of going, I can have whatever I want when I want. I just want to make my decisions more conscious. Yeah, I don't know if that's helpful. I just think it's important to kind of highlight both of these because it's sometimes spoken as like, this will be the outcome. You're either told you're going to have to deal with weight gain and accept that, or you're told it's going to be great, you're going to lose weight. And
yeah, you don't know. I still think sometimes like to be prepared if you do, like that is something that, to go into something and think, well, I might not, I will be one of the ones that doesn't need to gain any weight. Yeah. Like sometimes we do. And
yes,
that can be, I think having a mental preparation for that is important.
Yeah. As well as that assumption that we're all fed that weight gain means bad.
Right.
Like,
yeah,
that's
I gained
episode.
weight.
Yeah.
Yeah. I gained weight in recovery. And I wasn't in a small body. I'm in a mid-sized body. So I think that matters too. I also did gain weight and it was good for me. Like society wouldn't tell me so. The BMI chart probably wouldn't tell me so. I don't even know anymore. I don't do it, but I am by all accounts healthier now for having done it.
And the next piece is about increasing self-awareness. Don't know why I said it like that. I can close the gaps. I'll make that sentence flow. Trust me. I'll sort it.
It was dramatic. Self-awareness.
Yeah. Mm. So why self-awareness is so important? I realize I keep throwing it as a question to you, so I can speak to the person if you want.
You do this one.
Why is self-awareness so important? It just seems so evident that it suddenly feels really hard to describe why it is. Because this is self-work, right? This is self-development, self-growth work. So we are the subject of this. So therefore, our knowledge of ourselves, how we see ourselves, how we interpret our behavior, the attitude that we have towards ourselves, all of this is a big part of what will help or hinder us moving forward. Understanding what's going on in our minds is massively important. And I feel like you're someone, Steph, who has generally had quite a high level of self-awareness because we know you don't deceive yourself. Whereas for me, I would say much less so. And one of my fears is of not being self-aware. So I do my best to work at it. But a few things really helped. One, therapy did help. I was lucky enough to be able to access that. I needed to access it to be able to become a therapist. It was a requirement. Otherwise, there's no way I would have done therapy for as long as I did. But that speaking aloud my thoughts, writing my thoughts down was enormously helpful. Being quite open with the people around me as well. I wasn't a closed book about a lot of the things that were going on. And sometimes having people that you can bounce things back and forth with can be enormously helpful at increasing self-awareness. What else do you think makes us more self-aware?
Well, one of the things that self-awareness, how that combined with my recovery was I really did believe for most of my life that all of my issues, all of my problems, all of my bad moods and limitations were because of my body or my eating disorder. I blamed everything on that. I put everything in that bucket. And through recovery, and maybe even prior, as I was like leaning into it, I started to recognize that I was just projecting a lot of things I didn't accept about myself onto the shadows of it's because of my body. It's because I have an eating disorder. And part of what this taught me was some things are just about me. And I need to work on accepting certain things about me instead of using food and body image as sort of the excuse or as the reason why, and that I really was this like better version of myself somewhere, if only not for these things. I name this one a lot, but introversion was something about myself I couldn't accept. I thought it was my job to be an extrovert, or at least just be, I don't know, more friendly or something, or more inclined to want to go out. And I don't know why that one was really, really hard for me. But I was like, well, the reason I don't want to go out and the reason that I need so much alone time is because I need to hide because my body looks a certain way, because I just binged. And from learning that, like, no, you just need a lot of time to yourself, and you need a lot of time to restore, even more than someone else. You don't need like that. Accepting that in and of itself kind of took the burden off it having to be about these other things that I was always assuming it was about. So looking at the ways that we project our problems and our stuff onto these things, instead of being able to say, what is it about me, or what is it about how I am that I need to start looking more at and accepting and getting more compassion around. Because I think this is linked to compassion.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really important part. And for me, that comes back to humility. For me, it was about going, I don't actually know that doing these things are going to make me feel like that. I don't know what's going to make me feel a certain way. I can only kind of come back to myself now. Actually, as you were talking, I was thinking about the word self-awareness. I don't even mean self-analysis. I mean just being more aware of myself, which I found through practice of yoga, for example. And I found that in meditation, and that's not for everybody. And I know that the kinds of things that are so often like, oh, just do yoga and meditation. That will cure your anxiety. That will make you feel like this and make you feel like that. And it wasn't that, but it was about being able to just be in my mind, because I realized that I was constantly trying to escape that. I wanted to be anywhere else but that. Just give me something for me to, either I needed something to hook onto if I was engaged enough in it, or I wanted to check out, and I would use food kind of in that way to do that. But for anybody then who is still at this stage where they are trying to understand themselves, and is it about questioning ourselves and things that we have just taken to be true, assumed to be true? Because there's a loosening of something, I think, that needs to happen in self-awareness, because it's recognizing what's not serving us, recognizing what we've assumed to be true that may not actually be true, and then being willing to consider the possibility of maybe loosening that up, introducing other possibilities.
How do you do this though? Well, I mean, you're saying through we're like in giving tools. I mean, self-awareness is a tool. And you found this through yoga and meditation and things like that?
Well, how did you find it? How did you get to a point where you realized, actually, it's not my eating disorder. I need a different approach to myself. There was something.
Question.
Yeah.
I don't know. One day I didn't journal. I don't like journaling. It actually makes me more anxious.
Mm-hmm.
And so did meditation for a long time, even though I really want to kind of give it another go now. But I remember just like, I think my self-awareness process just happens as I think all day. It's just like, I was just like, oh my gosh, you just recognize a pattern. You just start to pay attention to patterns. I don't know that I have a way that I did that. It just was like, oh, I think there's a readiness for it too. There's this part of me that was like, I think talking about, you know what? I think a lot of my recovery happened on Instagram. As silly as that sounds to say, there were a lot of ideas on Instagram that I was taking in, and I had a good amount of self-awareness to say, like, this fits, but this doesn't. I didn't just blindly accept everything I read, but I was following a lot of nuanced accounts. I made sure that I was following not just like the generic kinds. Like, people were talking about things, even things that weren't about food, like things about rest, things about introversion and extroversion. There's lots of big names out there that are talking about these things who've written books, and I was learning about all that. And as I was reading it, I think that there was a lot of like, huh, I've never thought about it that way. How does that apply to me? How doesn't that apply to me? And there was an ongoing conversation in my mind all the time, just from, oh, this is also during, like, part of this time was during COVID. So I had a lot of time to, like, I was on social media a lot. And I think I got a lot out of that.
I think it's an interesting point actually that you're raising, that we can learn about ourselves through what we resonate with, like what we're reading or what we're listening to. There's so much, because like you say, you're reading something and then the question is, okay, well, how does this apply to me? And I think that for me is a key piece here, is giving a little bit of time to consider what it means for us in order to increase self-awareness. What I know I can certainly fall into, and maybe other people might be able to relate to this, is kind of binging on content. Like, I just want to keep filling my head with what this person says, because I just want to download their brain and take everything that they've got and then just make it my own like that. And that, I think, kept me in this chasing place. So it wasn't really until I came back to, like with Byron Katie, she has the whole work where you work through questioning your thoughts. That was a big one for me, I think, around self-awareness. So I'm gonna bump it up here.
Okay.
And she talks about, you identify your thoughts, you identify your judgments, and then you go through these questions. And this is all available online for free at thework.com. You can download the worksheets, give it a go. I often recommend people go on YouTube and watch her doing the technique with other people as well. But when I took that and I sat down in my own mind and did the work, that's when it changed. But I watched it for a long time, thinking I was getting the benefits through watching everybody else do the work.
It's making my like my muscles are cramping just thinking about having to do that. I don't know why the formality of this makes me nervous, and it makes me feel like no. That my rebel comes up. So another note here, that like what Sarah does, what I do, we differ between ourselves, and we may differ from you as well. So the independent thinking is a big part of this process, and everything, I think. So remembering that if you're resonating with this, what Sarah's saying here or anywhere, move towards what resonates, to your point earlier. And because I
just want to add something though. The thing is with doing something like Byron Katie's work, was I can honestly say that every single time I did it, I felt the benefit of doing it. Every single time I felt a bit calmer, I felt a bit better. Whereas something like journaling, I could journal and sometimes I might feel different and sometimes I wouldn't feel different at all. So I think it became reinforcing in that aspect. If you're doing it and you're not really getting, if you like, the reward, are you going to go back into it? Because I generally can be quite resistant against formalized things like that, which is probably why I didn't actually sit and do the worksheets for a long time. In fact, I don't think I really did the worksheets until I went to see her live, and I was forced to in there. And then I started doing it on my own. Yeah, in fact, that is where I first did a worksheet, was with her.
Okay.
And then afterwards I did it on my own.
I feel like if I was forced to do certain things that I'm resistant to, that would be my way in too. And that's something to think about, like going to a workshop or joining something that will get you to potentially do something that you wouldn't otherwise do. I think can be useful, but you also have to recognize if it's not working for you, or if there's too much resistance and you're pushing back against it, that also matters. Don't force yourself, but if it feels like that's a way in, like an invitation to, then maybe working at it that way. I just liked peppering little ideas through my day and being at liberty to decide when I wanted to think more about that, or how, to sort of, that was just my MO. But maybe if I'd gone to a Byron Katie workshop, this conversation would be entirely different. I don't know though, because I read her book and I don't know. She's just not for me.
And that's fine.
I know.
But it must be strange then, I guess, to hear me like going on about it. You're going, I don't get it. I want to get it. I don't,
but it's like the way our brains need different things, and that's just, I believe that very much.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm just projecting because I just think I would feel left out. If you're so excited about something, I'd be like, I want to be a part of that, but I'm just,
what the heck is this worksheet?
Me. Yeah.
No, I'm okay with not, because I don't want another to do. So I'm okay with being okay like this. I don't feel left out. Compassion is another tool that we talk
Mm-hmm.
about. And again, there's going to be people who are talking about that in a way that's very formal. Kristen Neff has tons. She's got a lot of content and workbooks and workshops about compassion. Like that's a study of its own. Again, though, I found compassion through the art of just meandering through my day and figuring out how that would apply to me and when, and my entry into compassion. Because by the way, I didn't like the whole idea of compassion because to me it felt too soft. And I was just someone who generally was much more like, no, I don't need to be softer on myself. That's not my issue. It was, but I couldn't have seen it that way. So my door in was just more fierce self compassion, more matter of fact, more just like understanding without judgment in a very kind of like almost mechanical way. Science was kind of my road into compassion. Even as I talk about the Minnesota starvation experiment, like that to me was a version of my own compassion to myself because I was like, oh, you actually make sense because blah, blah, blah. This is how that works. You don't need to carry that anymore. So compassion can take a whole lot of different forms. And again, that will resonate differently for everybody. I have clients who learn to call themselves sweetheart. I could never do that, but some people really need to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's what
I do
kind
that.
of compassion you need. I know
I
I've
do
heard
that.
you say things like
Yeah.
that, like honey, and I'm like, oh, that's so nice for you.
I'll be like, Sarah, sweetheart. It's always hand on heart. I do it automatically doing it now. I'm like, Sarah, sweetheart, like you're okay. You're gonna be okay. And for me, what I need reassurance. That's what I need. I need reassurance that whatever this is will pass. I need reassurance that I'm just okay in that moment. Because in a moment of, I don't even know like what it might be. Let's say shame. Yeah, a moment of shame or feeling like I really messed up. To be able to go in the midst of it, that I can be disappointed with myself without that being shame. Like I can just feel that disappointment that maybe I feel like I dropped the ball or I didn't do that thing that I wanted to do. I think a big bit as well was recognizing unrealistic expectations that I was setting for myself. There was kind of a realization actually that the quality of my life, I can't remember who says it, but they said the quality of your life is dictated by the voice in your head that narrates your life, right? So how you are talking to yourself about your life dictates the quality of your life. And that was a big one for me. So I genuinely think I have built up this voice over the years. I don't think my critical voice we've spoken about this before on the podcast, was as harsh and vicious as many other people describe. But it was more of a felt sense for me. It was rarely like really critical thoughts that I was aware of. It was just a felt sense of shame. I would feel a lot of shame, just feeling like it's unbearable to be me, but not even having language or thoughts or reasons why. Especially like the last few years, this has been big for me, building up this kind of allied voice. And it is the one that comes in and goes like, you're okay. You're going to be okay. This is happening. This is happening. You feel like this, you feel like that. I was in therapy the other day and she was using this analogy of me kind of being in the woods and feeling lost and the fear and the uncertainty of not knowing which way to go. And I was like, yes, that really resonates. That's how I am feeling in this moment. And there's a me, like a meta me above that. It's not in the forest that's going, you're okay. And it was really interesting to have that moment of she's saying, I'm going, yes, but there's another part of me that's not feeling this, that's not in this. And that I think has been huge and really influenced by the retreats that I've gone on that I think I have mentioned before on the podcast. I definitely want to put the details for that below for anyone who can do it. It's in the UK.
I want to do that.
You should. The Heroes, I don't say should very often, but I'm going to use it now. You should. The Heroes Journey.co.uk. They do them around the UK. From a retreat perspective, they're very reasonably priced comparative. This is on the more affordable end of the spectrum.
In the UK though, right? Like in the US, it is much more expensive.
Yeah, in the US, it's like 10, 15 grand, something like that. It's not called Hero's Journey. They call them something like enlightenment intensives or something like that. That really shifted something in terms of how I experienced myself.
Well, I think when we're talking about compassion here, the tool that I would liken to it, because it's hard to say, like, how do you and make that actionable? It is the self-talk in a way, or the self-alliance, which to me starts with self-talk. So I would almost conceptualize compassion, like the tool for it is the way you're talking to yourself and looking at that and hearing it. Because I think for me, I think I needed to feel not alone and protected. That was missing for me. I felt like I was just always succumbing to my own horrible self-talk. And it was like me, I didn't know, no one was there to protect me from that. And no one was there to, I felt so, you know what I mean? Just the way you can make yourself feel by the way you talk to yourself. That feeling was what was not helpful. And I needed to feel like protected. And it was me, my own voice that came in to help do that. It was actually not really me. It was this voice. It was just this like, nope, nope, no, we're not talking. Nope. Like that. And that's what I needed.
See, I think this kind of overlaps within a child work, although the last thing you said kind of made me almost want to move away from that, but I'll say it anyway, and you can just let me know what you think. To think about in a child work, what our inner child might need is like, what was the thing that we wanted that we felt like we didn't get? And finding a way to give that to ourselves. So if yours was a sense of feeling alone and what you needed was for an adult to come alongside you and do what, say what, that's the question for each person to ask themselves. What is it that I really needed to hear and experience from that person, and then giving it to ourselves? I think that is a really big act of self-compassion. And so for me, I haven't even put it together like this, but when I was thinking about, the reassurance part and that I need that when I'm overwhelmed. That's the big one for me. When I'm overwhelmed, when there's a lot of different feelings, it's not a specific feeling, but it's this combination of something where I just feel overwhelmed and I feel very alone in those moments. I think as a kid, if I was overwhelmed, I think it was kind of like a pull yourself together kind of thing. Like, this is not reasonable. This is not rational. This is how, like, my felt sense of it. I can't even be that specific with, oh, my parents said this and they did that. But it wouldn't have been met with what I think I would have needed at that time, which is why I'm giving it to myself now. And this is like the allied part of us that needs to be built up if it wasn't automatically put in there when we were a kid.
Yeah. Can I say something on behalf of just inner child work? Doesn't mean you have to reject your parents, because if I was your parent, Sarah, I might come at parenting you, or I mean, to my kids, I probably do, through the lens of what I needed, which might not be what they needed or what you need, because we're all different. Right. So I might be like protective with my kids and more like a firm ally. Right. But I know that my middle daughter, actually, I think that goes for my first, that might help her. But my middle one needs something softer that I don't have. You know what I mean? Like, that I'm not so good at. And that's not because I'm a bad mom or because she needs something too much, there needs the wrong thing. It's just that our parents are humans and they only can give what they know to give, or what maybe they didn't get. And that's going to be different because of our natures, that we need different things. And so it's not like, you don't have to be angry to do inner child work. You don't need to be wronged by your parents. You could have wonderful parents and still need inner child work, because I think it's just a bigger existential thing than just a matter of my upbringing looked a certain way. You know what I mean?
Yes. And no, I don't hold anything against my parents with that.
You weren't suggesting that. I sometimes suggest that.
I think that might be some projection onto your kids as well. Don't you go holding this against me.
Yeah.
I'm a human being too.
Yeah. Well, I offer that to my mother. So I
want it in return. Yeah. Well, there might be some things as well that are worth giving an honorable mention to. Things that people might want to look into that can be helpful in recovery. One that's often touted around a lot is mindfulness. And this is basically the capacity to watch our minds, right? Well, that's how I think of it as well. Anyway,
there's a bit of self-awareness blended with that one too, I think.
Well, that's exactly what I'm thinking as well. And even with something like mindful eating, we've got an episode on that as well. I'm pretty sure we do.
I'll look it up.
Yeah, but there must be some that we can just send them to episodes. Let's do some honorable mentions and just send them to episodes.
I don't think we have one. Okay. We don't have one on mindfulness.
We must do.
We don't.
Okay. I think there's a few honorable mentions that are worth
Mentioning.
mentioning. Yeah. We very briefly mentioned journaling, and we have a whole episode on that. It's episode 107. But should I journal? So if you want to find out a little bit more about that and how to approach it, if that is of interest to you. We also touched on intuitive eating, and we have a little intuitive eating mini series, which is episodes 101 to episodes 103.
Yeah, intuitive eating as a concept is very helpful for people in the beginning stages of this, or can be very helpful for people in the beginning stages of learning about recovery or embarking upon a path of such.
If you identify with being a highly sensitive person, you might want to check out episode 87.
A lot of people also benefit from mindfulness as a practice, which can also go into the realm of meditation too. We don't actually have an episode on that yet, but it's an area where there is a dearth of information. Dearth? I just questioned myself.
I wanted to say girth, but that's not right.
Dearth might be the opposite of what I'm trying to say. Dearth meaning it's a lot of it's a scarcity. It's not a dearth of information.
Whoops.
But I have to re-say it. Mindfulness is an area where there is a plethora of information out there.
Re-say it. Leave that in.
Really?
Yeah, leave all of that in. I enjoyed it. We've also spoken about anchor meals, and we have a whole episode about meal planning and about food logging, whether that can be helpful or harmful as well, which is another potential tool on episode 56.
I also want to give an honorable mention to somatic work and getting in touch with the body's felt sense, which is something we're largely disconnected from in eating disorders. I think a lot of times we're looking at what's the tool from that cognitive intellectual perspective, because that's preferable and more comfortable. Somatic work is a completely different angle of looking at the way you're experiencing everything and the way that the body is holding on to things. We have an episode on trauma, which does tap into this a little bit, which is episode 57. And I also have an upcoming course. I think by the time this airs, it'll be coming out in a week or two for beginners who are looking to learn about the nervous system and somatic experiencing and how that might enhance your recovery or complement it if you are already recovered.
I have some free meditations on my YouTube channel. One of the meditations is actually within our podcast. It's between episodes 23 and 24, which is a guided meditation to reset after compulsive eating. I also have a guided meditation you can do before a binge when you're experiencing an urge, and one on self-acceptance. I always liked a guided meditation on the times when I was trying to come back to myself, but I just couldn't, had nothing to hold on to. And I still do them now. I really do like a guided meditation.
Yes, for sure. It's almost like the way I prefer guided journaling instead of just this free for all. Plus, if you find somebody whose voice you really like, it's regulating, right? Like that is inherently regulating to be sort of coasting along someone's regulated voice, unless it annoys you, and in which case get out.
Which reminds me, I have a YouTube episode called Journal with Me as well, where we sit together and journal. So you might want to check that out too. As previously mentioned, intuitive eating is an excellent tool. We have also teamed up in the past and hope to again in the future with Intuitive Eating Hub. And they have courses on their website that you can free study or join and do courses with other people.
I feel like we can't offer tools without talking about the importance of looking at body image and body neutrality as a concept, and the many different, that can take you down a whole bunch of other rabbit holes. But just, I think working with the body acceptance and body image is huge for this work as well. I will put also in our show notes some of the resources that have helped me and some of the accounts that help me as well. And I offer things in body image spaces, especially every summer. I host a body image workshop, which I personally love. But one of the most important things that we can offer as a tool, this is not supplemental, this is critical, I think, is support and community. That is everything, because this is such a lonely thing to do and nobody talks about it at dinner parties. So having other people that you can, where they're saying something and you're like, I could have said that myself, or that was something that was in my own head, and a space where you can put this stuff without feeling judged or like people don't get it, is regulating and it's safe. And it's offering some of the things that the eating disorder behaviors do in the first place. So creating community, and we offer one. We have a Life After Diets community that we do monthly support meetings. We have a private Facebook group that's very active and very, very supportive and kind-hearted people in there. We do live episodes and we do bonus Q&A episodes. What else do we do? I got some things coming down the pike.
Also, we're going to be doing a couple of in-person things next year. And if you're in the community, you will have first dibs on that. Probably a discount.
Probably.
No, you will. We'll
You
discount.
will. And also you've got us in every episode we have recorded. You can catch up on over 130 of them, and we'll make another 130. So you can have a weekly space to come to. And there's many other podcasts in this realm as well. Again, we'll list these things below so that you have you can pick and choose and see what resonates most for you. But there are things out there. There are support systems out there for sure.
Do you know what happened to me last week before we went into recording? I had a moment where I was thinking, one day this podcast is going to end. Like it has to at some point. I mean, whether it's one of us dies or we end before then, right? But one day this is going to end. And I just felt this really kind of anticipatory sadness that made me hurt. And then it made me go, I just want to end it now then, because if I'm going to have to go through this anyway, let's just like pull that plaster off now and let's call it a day. No, it wasn't as serious.
Okay.
It was not a actual ever going to be a thing. It was just that reflexive protective.
Your avoidant attachment showing up.
Well, I should just do that. But yeah, I also feel like this episode is, we went through a few things and then
yeah,
and like they have a whole load of stuff. Good luck with doing the notes underneath this one, because everything we mention is going to be listed out at the bottom with links.
All right. Thanks for hanging in there with us. And we'll be back next week with the final episode of the Back to Basics series, which is
the process of recovery. So we've thrown a load of stuff at you today, and it's understanding what to use when we talk about readiness. We talk about making mistakes. We basically just talk about what this journey can be like and how to navigate it.
All right. See you next week, everybody. Thanks for hanging in. We hope this has been helpful.